What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Trevi here again from Way of the Swan with the semi-final round of Adepticon Masters. This time we have a mirror matchup for you guys today. It is a Legion mirror match, Fyanna2, Torment of Everblight versus Lylyth3, the Reckoning of Everblight. Interestingly, two theme forces in this list. Both lists are in Oracles of Annihilation, the Legion theme force that gives free solos for taking war beasts. So obviously a very strong theme force, and as I think I mentioned in my previous video, very strong showing from theme forces in general during this Masters. There was only one player who didn't bring any theme forces, and most players brought both lists in theme. So today we have Jake Van Meter deploying here right now with his Fyanna2 list. I think what's going to be a very standard Fyanna2 list with 2 Angelii, 3 Nerifs, as well as the free solos, 2 Shepherds, 2 Sorcerers on Hellions, and 2 Forsaken. Now, the list also brings 2 light war beasts as well, a Rake and a Naga Nightlurker. Naga Nightlurker, obviously amazing support beast, bringing its gun with critical Shadowbind, which is a pretty big deal, as well as Wraithbane to get through armor buffs and stack with Fury. The Rake is an interesting add. I think Jake might be moving it out of his list in future builds, but it's essentially in there to add an additional threat, as well as some scenario presence, and just be a decent war beast. On the other side, we have another Oracles of Annihilation list. This is Lylyth3, bringing 3 Angelia and a Carnivean, the Naga, a Bolt Thrower to give Lilith Snipe, as well as a Seraph to slipstream things around. Lilith, playing in theme is a very interesting list. She doesn't play quite the same as she does in an out-of-theme list, which tends to bring a lot of shorter range guns, and she brings a lot of ranged attrition. This list tends to just stack heavies with an extremely high threat range. Lilith can stationary targets with her feet to send the Angelii in, threading some quick math 16 inches here, I think, with the Seraph in there. Also, the Angelii do bring boostable guns, as well as the Naga and the Bolt Thrower themselves, so they can trigger the feat for each other. The Carnivean, obviously a great include because Assault allows him to threaten very far with those range damage rolls, or potentially stationary things as well. He also gives Lilith the access to the Smitey Growth Animus, which is going to help her a lot in her survivability. She can get up to armor 20, which is very strong for a Warlock, especially a Battle Engine Warlock who tends to have a lot of hit points. She's going to be very mobile and very survivable in this list. So it's essentially a pretty standard Lilith list that that translates into the theme pretty well. Brings all those free support models. You lose some of the models that you generally take, things like Deathstalkers and Hellmouths that you'll see a lot with her, but in exchange you get the ability to bring an extraordinary heavy trade list that I think a lot of Legion lists are going to play. We have Jake going here, taking the first turn. He did opt to go first. Lilith can project a ton of threat if she is able to take the first turn. She threats 28 inches with her trample and then snipe shots from her bow there. So allowing her to move up the table means that she's essentially going to threaten almost the entirety of the table on the second turn. Jake does have this pretty great obstruction here around the center of the zone there. You can see there's also a forest that's encompassing Lilith's flag as well. That's also going to be a big deal in this game because Legion models, unlike Mark II, can't see through forests anymore in Mark III with their eyeless sight. So Jake's going to be able to use the trench as well as the cover from the obstruction in the center and line of sight blocking from the forest to hopefully protect his models on the way in. The one thing Fyanna isn't very strong against is stationary effects, such as Lilith's feet. So if Lilith is able to get a powerful Alpha Strike on with her extended threat ranges, as well as the defense reduction from stationary with her feet, it will be absolutely crippling to Fyanna's army. So the game's going to be mostly about mitigating the amount of damage that Lilith can get at ranged initially. What Fyanna does do is hit much harder than Lylyth with Fury, as well as the Nerifs being able to trade very well into the low armor Legion Warbeasts like Angelii. As long as they hit with their tail attack, they can charge in for free with the Hellion. Probably boost to hit the tail attack. If they do hit that, all of their head attacks are going to be automatically hitting. For Angelii, which rely almost entirely on their defense to keep them alive, when that Nerif is Fury to be power 18, it's going to go in at dice +1 on those Angelii, and it's going to be able to take them out very easily. And Jake does bring a lot of Nerfs in this list. He's bringing 3 Nerfs to the table. So he's hopefully going to be able to trade a little bit better than Lylyth is. So as you can see, taking the first turn, a pretty big deal for this particular list. It gives Jake the ability to get the board presence he needs to essentially vaporize anything that Lylyth puts into that zone. If Nerfs are able to, they can sprint back away to safety and play the hit and run game pretty well. Something that Lylyth generally likes to do, but we'll see if Fyanna can go toe-to-toe here. One interesting thing about this matchup that I'll talk about real quick here while the players are moving up the table is that Jake actually locked himself out of this list for the final round by dropping it into this round. For those who don't know, the Adepticon Masters qualifies for the top round of 8 out of a 4-round qualifying heat that I think it qualifies most of the undefeated players. Some players will get in on tiebreakers, strength of schedule for the most part. But for the most part, it's the undefeated players moving up to the round of 8 on the second day. Jake qualified out of those rounds, playing Fyanna2 all day. The rounds were considered a single event for the purposes of Divide and Conquer. So because of the Masters format, players would have to play both of the lists they brought over the course of the 7 rounds, and he played 6 straight rounds of Fyanna2 up and including this round. His other list was a Rias 1 list. I don't think he brought particularly seriously, but he decided to play Fyanna every single round and is going to be forced into playing her if he does end up making through this finals, or the semifinals, excuse me. It looks like we have some shots coming down from the Naga Nightlurker on the top there. Lylyth, the only defensive buff she's bringing is Battle Host and Spiny Growth. Probably not super important to keep the Naga around. We do have the Spell Martyr run up in front of it there, and looks like a Gallows came down from Fyanna onto the Angelius to move it into the forest there. So I think the Naga was going for a crit Shadowbind. I don't know if he ended up getting it. But we do have a Nerf moving up and ripping that Angel right off the table. So a huge pickup for Jake, initiating this heavy trade early on and moving into a very safe position with this Nerf. Lylyth's going to have to extend pretty far in order to stationary it. The Angelii don't really have an angle. They won't be able to melee it the next turn because they're not going to be able to see it through the forest there. So he can get some... Lylyth can get some shots onto it, but that's not really going to be a particularly primary target. And Jake's actually moving up to protect it here with a Sorceress and Hellion moving behind that forest and saying Wind Ravager. So that stops models from making range attacks within 8 inches of that model. And because it's behind the forest, it's going to be difficult for Lylyth to get around and take it out before the Angelii go. So that forest really stuffing up Lylyth's plans. She's not going to be able to pressure her flag and continue to make ranged attacks with that Sorceress there. The Angelius can potentially move into the forest to attack and remove that Hellion, but that's going to open up the Angelius to a counterattack from Jake's models. And as we just saw, the Nerfs are perfectly adequate at taking out Angelii, especially if they're softened up by some of the Angelii guns or the ranged attack from the Naga Nightlurkers. So this move puts a ton of pressure on Brad. He's going to be forced to play into this heavy trade game a heavy down. Now, he does have the threat range and the defense mitigation from Lylyth's feet to help him out. He doesn't have the damage buff that Fyanna brings or the weight of numbers, but he does have a little heavier armor, especially on that Carnivian. So we'll see if he's going to be able to make things happen. Now, it doesn't look like Fyanna feated this turn, and I don't think she would have. I'm not sure where she is. She might be in the trench, actually, hiding pretty far back. And so she's going to be relatively safe. It might even be a good play here, although it doesn't look like Brad's going to be going for it, but to try to spray some of the Angelii down, stationary them, and try to remove them with ranged attacks to even up the peace trade a little bit. But it doesn't look like he's going to be trying for that. The Carnivian just moving into the zone and casting Spiny Growth to protect it. Now, I assume, unless Brad's able to cripple some of those Angelii, that Carnivian's going to go down, and Fyanna is probably going to be counter-feeding this turn in order to keep herself safe. She'll probably move up into the zone and try to score some scenario pressure, unless Lylyth is able to make a pretty aggressive play and really jam up the zone. Now, the scenario is becoming a pretty big deal right now. Lylyth is essentially going to have to take the Alpha Strike despite her long threat ranges because of the scenario presence that Jake has moving up the table so far and using this obstruction. In most matchups, the obstruction would actually be kind of a double-edged sword because of the fact that it's going to block charge lanes, but because the entirety of Jake's army is flying outside of Fyanna and the Light War Beasts, he's going to be able to move over that pretty easily. Legion also has ways to get around it with the Seraph. They can do a 2-inch placement to the sides to try to get around cover so that they can take advantage of cover and then continue to move up the table with charges. That's a pretty big benefit of the Legion faction. It really helps stymie the poor, or the casualties they'll suffer from the poor defensive stats of most of their war beasts, but they're able to take better advantage of terrain than almost any other faction of the game, outside of Circle, potentially. It does look like we have some models getting taken out by Lylyth here up at the top of the hill. That hill, not giving her an elevation bonus, but it is going to give her arcing fire. She's completely on top of it. And I think she just ends up taking out some shepherds, potentially, which is a little bit annoying for Jake. The shepherds are very important for Fyanna since she only has a 12-inch control area and likes to throw those war beasts pretty far off the table. Jake likes to use the shepherds quite often to move up the table themselves and essentially extend the control area of Fyanna by allowing the war beasts to force outside of her control area inside the shepherd's command range. Which is a big deal when your war beasts are speed 7 plus and have access to slipstream for huge threat ranges. But it looks like Lylyth just really being stuck behind this wind ravaging Hellion behind the forest there, not willing to commit any heavies to try to take it out. Committing the Angelias to take it out might have let Lylyth do a little bit more, but Jake's put most of his army in cover, so it's not going to be a huge deal. And now Jake's going to just be able to do that again, force some of Lylyth's models forward, and potentially start some very strong scenario pressure. So we have some proxy bases going down. It looks like he's going to get some charges into the Carnivian. If he can take that Carnivian out, he can potentially put Fyanna behind the obstruction in the center of the zone there. Feat with her, put her up to very high defense. She'll be a 22 against range attacks, I think. So even Lylyth's going to have a tough time cracking that. So overall, really impressed with the amount of pressure that Fyanna2 is able to put on Lylyth this game. A combination of the terrain layout as well as Jake's aggressive play is really putting her on the back foot, putting a lot of scenario presence on the table. And I'm seeing, despite her long threat ranges and her ranged firepower, a bit of a flaccid response from Lylyth. It was a little awkward going second for Lylyth because she was able to choose table side, and neither side I think would have helped her too much. Giving Jake the side with the forest with that flag right next to it would have been, I think, potentially spelled disaster for Lylyth. She wouldn't be able to get line of sight to Fyanna almost ever, and Fyanna could just sit over there and farm control points and wait for Lylyth to be forced into her. This is a very similar situation. Taking the obstruction forces Jake to play a little bit more aggressive, but gives him the option to pressure that zone, put a ton of firepower into it. Looks like we do have the Nerif moving up here, and that's 2 Nerifs moving up there, potentially. Not really sure what's going on right now. Nerif's moving up and attacking the Carnivian, I assume. Yep, and taking it off the table and then sprinting back. Now, I think what happened is that one Nerif pulled the Carnivian with Vortex. The first Nerif pulled the Carnivian forward, and they just decided not to move the model to make things easier. Perfectly reasonable with all of the overreaching models, sculpts that Legion tends to have. But that is a huge benefit for Jake. He's able to take out the Sorceress on Hellion on the bottom side with some Angelius guns, it looks like. Push that Wind Ravager even farther with the second Hellion. It looks like not a lot of free charges are going to be very useful this particular turn. And pushing at defense 17 up the table is a pretty big deal for Fyanna as well. I think Fyanna's behind the obstruction in the middle there, behind the Angelii, who are blocking line of sight to her as well. And that is going to score Jake 2 control points and remove any any threat to the flag as well. So if Lylyth is ever put into a position where she has to feat preemptively, she might feat this turn in order to try to take out some of these war beasts. She could aim and potentially stationary the Nerif and the Sorceress that are there. But that Sorceress on Hellion, I assume we're Wind Ravagered, excuse me. So she's not going to be able to aim this turn. But very dominating position for Jake, especially since Fyanna's dominating that zone to score control points. So we'll see what Lylyth's going to be able to do to combat this turn. I think the one model was able to take out the Sorceress. I assume it was potentially the Bolt Thrower or the Naga able to take that Sorceress out. So I think that relieves a lot of pressure off Lylyth. She's going to be able to aim. And I think, unfortunately, most of Jake's important models are going to be way outside of... are going to be either behind cover or significantly outside of Lylyth's threat range. Looks like Lylyth taking one shot and missing an attack. Hitting a second one on the Nerif in the front there. So at least that Nerif's going to go down to ranged attacks. And just trying as hard as she can to stationary as much as possible. It looks like she's taking a shot into another Nerif. Oh, no, excuse me, that's a Shepherd. So kills off the Shepherd. Stationary is one Nerif. That's going to give her a free spell, probably a Battle Host for free, I would assume. And then that Nerif in the center there is going to be taken out pretty trivially, I assume. I don't think Lylyth even has to commit models to combat to take it out, although she might have to in order to contest the zone. If she doesn't put enough into the zone, Fyanna's going to win pretty trivially at scenario. But it does look like we have the Sorceress charging in, so takes that Nerif out. Must have been damaged previously. I wonder... I bet Lylyth had attacked it earlier. And then we have the Seraph moving into the zone and taking some shots into... And Angelia's back there hitting it. That's impressive. And then dealing some more damage as well. Now, the Seraph is a big model to put into the zone. That is a very important model. Its shots flaring stuff is very important for all of the Mat 6 Legion Warbeasts, as well as Slipstream giving them +2 threat range is a huge deal. So trading that to contest the zone is a pretty big deal, but I think Brad is sensing here that Fyanna's going to push him out of the zone unless he makes some aggressive plays. So he has taken one heavy out. That's something. He's stationaried another heavy, and so that will be forced to shake in order to do anything. If he puts enough into the zone, he can hope that Jake isn't able to clear it, isn't able to score, and he has enough to come back the next turn and make something happen. But we'll see how it goes. Looks like we have the Bolt Thrower going. And taking some shots. Looks like what I assume is a miss, and Jake's electing not to dodge. He's probably exactly where he wants to be behind the obstruction there, so dodging wouldn't really get him anything. And Angelia is moving into the zone as well. Takes a shot at that Nerif and misses again, and then that Sorcerer and Hellion behind the forest is finally taken out. So we see a little bit of work getting done, not quite enough for Brad to get into this game substantially. It looks like if Jake's not able to kill the bottles in the zone, he's in a position where he's going to be able to repulse them out pretty easily with the Angelius Animus. So all he has to do is, if he focus fires on the Angelius at the top there in the forest, that model is going to be taken out pretty quickly, I think, by the Nerifs. If he's not able to clear out the other models, the Seraph and the Angelius and the Hellion there, I think all he has to do is kill the Hellion, and he can repulse the other two Warbeasts out of the zone. It does look like we have some shots from the Seraph and the Naga going down to deal damage to these guys where they are. This is... I assume the proxy base is going to be a Nerif pretty soon, and then Nerif's going to go in and take that Angelius out. There it goes. Attacking that Angelius to auto-hit it, taking it out, and then attacking the Sorceress and taking that model out as well. So this is going to be a pretty trivial zone clear for Jake, and that's probably going to put him up to 4 control points, which is essentially where he needs to be. Lylyth is going to be forced into trying an assassination run, if she even has one, or she's going to lose this game on scenario the next turn. So we have the second nerf going in. It looks like it's going to take out the Angelius. Nope, it's just going to beat back the Angelius out of the zone, and then attack the Seraph. So it doesn't even look like the other Angelii are going to need to commit. Maybe one of them. Brad really needs to hope for this Angelius to survive so he can get something done this next turn, although it is engaged by the Nerif. Looks like there is the Angelius, and it is going to armor pierce into the Seraph and continue to attack it. So we're not going to see a repulse from this Angelius. It doesn't take it out, so he's going to end up committing the second Angelius as well. Probably not exactly where Jake wants to be. He wants to keep Angelii back so he has the option to repulse on the next turn if he needs it. But if you have to clear the zone, you have to clear the zone. So there we go. The second Angelius armor piercing the Seraph to death, and just chilling right there. So we have Fyanna behind that obstruction still. It looks like she has a very healthy camp on her, 3 or 4 Fury, going up to 4 control points. Lots of transfer targets available. I don't think Lylyth is going to be able to win this game. Lylyth could potentially score 2 control points this turn by dominating her own flag and controlling Jake's flag with the Shepherd. That's not going to be quite what he needs. He still has an Angelius on the table in front of the Nerif there that the Nerif wasn't able to take out. So I don't know if that's gonna be quite enough. The thing you have to remember as well is that Jake's at 4 control points. He can score 1 additional by dominating his flag, and the only model on the flag right now is a Shepherd over there. So if Brad's not able to put significant beef over by that flag and in the zone, Fyanna's going to have multiple avenues to win on scenario on the subsequent turn. So Brad's really trying to damage control at this point, although I'm not sure it's going to be enough. Looks like the bolt thrower runs into the zone there, out of range to be repulsed out, so Jake's going to have to roll out and kill it, but that's probably not a huge deal. So we have Lylyth moving. She is moving to the flag, it looks like. She either way has space to reposition to the flag, I believe. And taking her shots into what could be an Angelius. Looks like a pretty big damage roll right there. And almost killing an Angelius, but not repositioning onto the flag. So Brad's going to score 1 this turn. It doesn't look like he has enough to move over to that other flag, so Fyanna's going to be able to clear that pretty trivially and win on scenario. It looks like the Angelius ran up the table, all the other Angelii falling down with their huge wings. The flag getting moved around a little bit, whoopsie daisies. But I think it's some frenzies going down because the War Beasts were run so hot the previous turn, but I don't think it's going to matter. All Fyanna has to do is charge over to that flag. We actually have the Forsaken do it. Fyanna runs to the flag, and Jake's going to win on scenario. So that's Jake winning with Fyanna2 Oracles of Annihilation versus a Lylyth3 Oracles of Annihilation list in the semifinals of the Adepticon Masters. Jake really playing this matchup like he needed to, winning the roll to go first is a huge deal, especially on this table layout and the scenario. Jake putting a ton of pressure on the scenario in order to push Lylyth back, and eventually take the win. But stay tuned for the final round coming up pretty soon here, guys. This was a Legion mirror match. The interesting thing was that the other table in the semifinal round of this this top 4, was a Convergence mirror match of 2 Destruction Initiative lists. So we're going to see a Legion versus Convergence in the final game, with at least 1 Destruction Initiative and Rias 1 as Jake's other list, which he is locked into. So stay tuned for that, guys, and take it easy.